I'd like to welcome to the JPP Saul Garlick, co-founder and CEO of Fabric. Saul's career has been dedicated to how technology and human connection can intersect to drive engagement and progress in live experiences and education. I have to say this is fascinating, particularly somebody like myself who's very engaged in relationships. His interest in merging digital solutions with the power of personal interactions has not only redefined educational models, but has also elevated fan experiences and major sports events. As co-founder and CEO at Fabric, Saul has built Fabric into a fast emerging leader in the mixed reality space for live events. Fabric's platform allows teams, leagues, venues, and events to publish and deliver gamified mixed reality experiences instantly at live events while collecting real-time data analytics from fans. Fabric's customers can easily launch loyalty and rewards programs, payment integration, social interactions, and much more at any time, at any place. Fabric's working with the NBA, MLB, NHL, among others. Prior to Fabric, Saul founded other companies, was very, very impactful in other realms, particularly in education and expanding impact in West Africa, schools in West Africa, serving thousands of students. He's also an adjunct professor at Art Center College of Design, social entrepreneur in residence at Southern Cal's Brittingham Social Enterprise Lab. He is incredibly accomplished. He's a Truman Scholar, 30 Under 30 Entrepreneur, Inc., 30 Under 30 Entrepreneur, educated at Johns Hopkins University, lives in LA with his two sons. Saul, I want to thank you for making the time to be here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump in. I always like to begin by asking my guests, after I introduce them very formally and broadly, to hear a bit in your own words. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I think a dad and a husband, I think first and foremost, and a Jewish American trying to make things happen. But I think the through line for me, when I look at my career and what I've been doing, is that I am a person who enjoys building things that do have a meaningful and material impact on society. And the impact that I'm interested in is usually oriented towards creating equal access to opportunity, to leveling the playing field and creating access to opportunity. And that has manifested in many ways. Typically to do that, or at least in my experience, the way I like to do it, is to build platforms that invite people to unlock their potential. So when you think about my first company, Think Impact, which sent college and grad students to live and work in rural Africa and Latin America to build businesses, what we were really doing is we were trying to transfer the creative, process of design thinking and new thinking on poverty and orienting towards opportunity, towards assets, and creating new opportunities for people in communities where people have usually sort of discounted that, where they've thought others are poor and there's no opportunity. So everything I've done has been to build a platform that creates opportunity for others. That's always been my focus. That's why I've ended up in education so much, because education is inherently designed or is intrinsically linked with the idea of creating opportunity for others. But I'm not an educator, other than, as an adjunct faculty. I'm not a trained educator. But I think I'm circling around the question, but who am I in my own words? I'm the child of South African immigrants, grew up in Denver, and interested in making a difference in the world through creating new enterprise.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I don't hear any South African accent at all. I guess
I was born in Denver, so I dodged the bullet. Although,
why? That'd be cool. I think that'd be super cool, personally. But
well, that's the thing, is in college, if I had an accent, I think it would have been a very appealing choice. But now it's fine to just sound like an American.
Got it. Fascinating. So, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about your parents. Kind of, they came from South Africa. I don't know, Johannesburg. Cape Town. I don't know where. Well, let's hear a little bit about them, how they grew up, etc.
Yeah. So, really interesting. My dad grew up in Johannesburg. My mom grew up in Pretoria. My dad became a physician in South Africa. So he went to Wits, the university in Johannesburg, and got a medical degree. And my mom was but she became a teacher when she was young, and she taught when she was in South Africa. Soon after they got married, they moved to Europe, looking to get out of South Africa. This was in 1976, before the Soweto uprising, and they moved to Europe, looking for a new place to raise their family. My dad always wanted to come to America, so they ended up eventually going from Amsterdam to London to eventually Chicago and Denver.
Oh, wow.
And my dad had to redo all of his residency when he got to the United States. He had to redo fellowship. I had to start over basically, except for the medical degree. And my mom, I don't think ever taught in the United States. That was not her calling, really. When and my dad, he had a really interesting path. He is an internist, but he ended up specializing in drug and alcohol addictions and correctional medicine. So he'd work with people who were, kind of also on the sidelines of society, and has built a really interesting career in that space, and saw kind of all of the opioid epidemic and things in America firsthand, and was dealing with that. My mom, mid-career, decided to go back to school and did social work. And so when I was training for my bar mitzvah, she was doing her, she went back to start to do undergrad and then grad school to get a degree in social work and to become a social worker and a therapist. And so I grew up where, mid-career, you make a pivot, you build, you create your path. And it was just, it was a great environment. I was very fortunate. I have two older sisters also. And so kind of, I was the youngest. So just kind of seeing all that going on, and kind of gave me the space to be whatever I wanted to be. And I ended up becoming quite entrepreneurial at a young age, and have really never let that go.
Fascinating, beautiful. Your parents and your sisters, where do they live right now? Like, where are they based out of?
They're all in Denver.
They're all in
So,
Denver. Wow. So you still
yeah,
have connections to Denver. You probably go visit on like more than one,
yes, they're the deep connections to Denver, lots of cousins out there. Yeah, it's pretty
You
cool.
ski? You ski?
I ski. I can ski.
Does your professional, what you're doing, we'll talk more about as we progress, does that have any intersection with skiing or not yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
So we'll work on that next.
Got it. So I got now the picture, at least in terms of conceptually, how you got into the space uh, that you're in, right? The motivation, the desire, the inspiration. What would you explain though practically when you were in Hopkins, like you were undergrad? What were you thinking about, formally? Were you always
Yep.
going to be an entrepreneur? Were you going to go to, what were you thinking about that?
So I'll go back 1 year before college. I was in high school, and I was always entrepreneurial. I used to sell chapstick to friends. I used to make things and sell things. I had a website that was selling vitamins when I was in high school. And we didn't make a lot of money, but I was always trying to build and do things.
Cool.
And I never labeled myself an entrepreneur. I had no idea that that's what I was. I just was like, I got excited by creating stuff. When I was a senior in high school, I went with my family to South Africa, and we went for a bar mitzvah. And we ended up going out to a rural area in the northeast corner of South Africa. Then it was called Mpumalanga. Now I think it's part of Limpopo. And we were there for a safari with a family friend, and going on a game reserve. They don't call it a safari in South Africa, but we were there for that. And then my family, who we were with, he said, look, it's beautiful. You can see leopard, lion. It's amazing. But on the other side of the fence, it's a different world. I'm going to show you the other side of the fence.
Right.
And, growing up, I'd always had awareness about policy. I was passionate about politics and government, and social change. But what happened that day changed my life. So we went to the other side of the fence, literally, and you're going from some of the highest sought after private safari land on earth. And on the other side of the fence, the land is worth nothing. And it's the former Bantustans. It's the homelands, they call them, which is where blacks during apartheid were allowed to live. And they have poor land for growing crops, and there's no running water and electricity, and it's very poor. And we visited some schools, and we visited the village, and I pledged to raise $10,000 to build a classroom. That I was 17. I think I might have just turned 18, and I pledged to build a classroom, and that really did change my life. And the reason I made that commitment was basically because my parents, as white people coming up in South Africa, did get an education. They did have opportunity. Granted, they were Jewish and it wasn't easy, and they weren't exactly loved by all in South Africa, but they had opportunity. And I was the beneficiary of that opportunity. And I felt a deep need to also kind of give back, to help bring up the next generation of Black South Africans post-apartheid in any way that I could. And so I committed to building this classroom, thinking that that was a way to make an impact. That led to me starting when I went to college, it first was a college group and then a nonprofit that I started called the Student Movement for Real Change. And we ended up raising funds and awareness to fight poverty in Africa. And we did that through college chapters and awareness raising events and parties and whatever we could do. And it wasn't a very strategic approach, but it felt like the right thing to do. One of the students that I was working with, who I had gone to high school with, who went to Pomona College, she approached me and she said that she had read about a water crisis in Kenya and she wanted to expand our work there. And, you know, the need to kind of right the wrongs of the past in South Africa was a good starting point. Mm-hmm. But I knew that there was need elsewhere, and maybe we could make a difference. And so she went off to Kenya for a study abroad and came back with a water project proposal. And we ended up working in Kenya. So all along in college, I was interested in how we, and then in grad school, international studies, how we as a powerful, wealthy country or beneficiaries of, you know, geography or history can do right by the world. And that's what compelled me. It still feels compelling to me. As I'm talking, it's bringing up old 20-year-old thoughts. And the question was, you know, what can we do and what should we do? So I was building the nonprofit and then started to think about, you know, okay, it's all great to send money abroad, but I wanted to bring students out. So after my freshman year, I brought 5 students to check out what I had seen in South Africa. And then later, fast forward 4 years, I would launch basically an international study abroad program. And that would send students on a summer-long, we called it the Global Development Internship. It was a full immersion for students to experience that and work with the locals. And then, you know, and then the rest is history. It was a pretty complex journey on how we make impact, understanding our role as wealthy or white people working in other geographies. But this idea that there is a responsibility to people beyond ourselves, and that we have to make right what has been clearly wrong, really sat with me and felt core to who I was.
Got it. How does that translate, let's say, I'm curious, like within the United States, in the sense that the focus seemed to be kind of beyond, you know, these borders.
Sure.
How did you think about that kind of at the time or even now?
Yeah, you know, it's so I think it's all equally important. I used to get that question, like, why are we working on fighting poverty in Africa when we could be worrying about poverty across the street? I went to college in Baltimore, you know, literally, it was like that. You know, for me, part of it was just a fascination with travel, with global engagement. I love learning about other cultures and being in different environments, and I think that drove me on a personal level, just curiosity about the whole world. The question of how we make an impact and what to do, you know, locally versus globally, I've migrated more locally, and I've actually migrated, so domestic, I guess you could say, back to the United States in a lot of ways with a lot of my work. But I really don't think it's an either or. You know, you have different tools in the toolkit when it's internal and you're looking in, and you have a different role, frankly. When it's internal, you know, we need to take ownership of our communities and do what we can for our individual communities. That's us. And everybody all over the world needs to do that. Sometimes, even when we're going about our work and doing something for ourselves, we need a little bit of outside perspective. We need a little bit of help.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean financial. It can mean perspective. It can mean skills development, opportunity, access. And I think what I was trying to do was kind of a little bit of a both and, where I was sending students, building their skills. They were engaging cross-culturally. They were learning how to deal with people very different from themselves. And a lot of them were minority. Like, it wasn't all white kids, obviously. And they would learn how to engage in different environments, and they could bring that back, bring it to their work. And so in a lot of ways, what we were trying to do, and what I think we accomplished in a small way, is nurturing a small cohort or a generation of social entrepreneurs who have gone on in their career to make an impact, some of whom I work with and meet with still today.
Oh, wow.
From programs years ago, because that thread, that reason still exists, and that ethos is still there.
So I read that you are a Truman Scholar, and I was that kind of piqued my curiosity. So I went a little bit just to research exactly what that is, and that's a pretty big deal from what I understand. Talk a little bit about kind of what that experience was like, why you applied for such a designation, and it's obviously very reflective. And even today, what repercussions does it have on your life today? Or maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
You're going deep here. So I applied for the Truman Scholarship because I believed my entrepreneurial inclination plus my desire for social change at scale would be best met in politics. And so I was very excited about going into politics when I was in college. Not understanding how much I wanted to actually just build businesses. So there was sort of a journey in college. My journey took me at first to politics. The Truman Scholarship is a scholarship toward grad school for 65 kids across the country. It's essentially, it is the living memorial. It is the only memorial for Harry Truman's presidency.
Wow.
And it's an office of the White House. It's right there in Lafayette Square and everything in DC. And so I applied because I was committed to this idea of public service, policy, and change the world. That did transform my life, because once you're in that community and you're in that world, you're talking with others all the time about how they're going to make an impact, and what are you doing what you can be doing to make an impact? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it effectively? Are you doing it appropriately? And I ended up spending a lot of my career asking those questions. What is my approach? What's appropriate? What's right? And this is before talk of power dynamics were in vogue. And so I think two things about the Truman experience. First of all, it was an unbelievable opportunity and community to be part of. And I met some of the smartest, most impressive people in my life in that cohort. They've gone on to do.
I saw Neil Gorsuch, right? Supreme Court Justice.
He's a Truman. Yeah. They've gone on to be Susan Rice, like cabinet secretaries, Supreme Court justices. But even in my class, they've gone on to be senior officers in government and in various roles, running for office and so on. But also like academics and whatever, lots of different things. It was very exciting when I got it, because it felt like it unlocked a path to making a bigger difference. And what I've learned from it is that for all the prestige and all the accolades and the network, at the end of the day, it's what you're going to do next that's going to make the difference. Right. What's the choice you're going to make, and what are you responsible for? And I think that sense of self-responsibility, no matter how many badges you have on your jersey, that's the only thing that really matters.
Right.
And luckily with the Truman community, I have additional access, and my responsibility is to make that access worthwhile.
So it's really great insight, in the sense that I remember giving a sermon about this many years ago in my old synagogue. The idea that with privilege comes responsibility, right? We would say in Hebrew, called achrayut, being taking responsibility for others. And a lot of these platforms or accolades are really just, they may feel good in the moment, or people may look at you a certain way, but really practically, it's really about how do you actualize or activate that platform you've been given, or that access you've been given, to make a positive difference in the world. So I appreciate that you made that quite sanguine point. I think that's very powerful. So thank you for that. I'm gonna doctor a question a little bit, in the sense that I generally ask very broadly kind of people who inspires them, but I'm gonna actually, and a lot of times people talk about their families. I'm gonna reformulate the question a little bit to say, I'd love for you to share one or two people that really inspire you that are not your family members. I'd actually love to hear, and that way you also, if your family members listen to this, they don't have to be offended that you didn't mention them, because I just removed them from the question. So I'd love to hear maybe about one or two people and it may be somebody you have direct contact with, and maybe somebody that you just, you read a book that they wrote, or you admire them, but you've never met them. So it could be either one.
Yeah, well, all right, I'll do one person I know and one person I don't really know.
One person you hope to get to know at one point. We'll say like
Yeah,
that.
well, sure,
If they're
sure.
still, if they're alive. Okay.
Right. So I'll tell you, there's one of my investors. His name is Win Churchill. He that's his name. It's
Cool.
an amazing name, big name. He uh so he's a trained lawyer. He's a Rhodes Scholar, went to Yale Law.
Wow.
And he became a lawyer, and then he went into sort of private equity. And he's in his 80s now. And he, without a single exception, every person I have ever met who he's introduced me to, or I've come across who we have a mutual connection, describes him as a mensch. And what makes him a mensch is not just that he's an honest, amazing, operator. Not just that he's a brilliant person. He seems to have the kind of insights and strategic thinking that is really the mark of a truly great leader. But he sort of works in a way that is humble and open to risk, open to trying new things, which I love that he's in his 80s and he's still exploring what's next and what's possible and how to do it. He's still figuring it out, but he's incredibly humble in doing all this. But he's been very successful, and as part of his success, he has actually gone on to found a charter school for underprivileged kids in the Philadelphia area. Wow. And when you take the person together, you just look at a life well lived, and it's not done. And I think that he's really the embodiment of a mensch. And he's been a great friend to Israel. He's made some really incredible investments there. And he's always looking to do right by others. And he does that from a finance perspective, which is pretty uncommon. And I have to appreciate that he sees the whole picture and he sees both sides of the equation. He's just a really, really incredible person.
Is he a descendant of Winston, or just
no? He grew up in a low income household in Philadelphia and made his own way. Went to Fordham, got the Rhodes, built his own life.
Wow.
And he really did. He did really make it happen. And I just think he's a tremendous person, and he's a great friend now. I've been lucky to get to talk to him weekly for years. And he's just available, and he's a real great person. So he inspires me. And he's done big things. The other thing is he's got the ambition to do bigger things. And I like the idea that we do have the ability to affect change, that we can build. The second person that I'm struggling to pick which one, but I think the one who really I would pick is Michael Bloomberg. So Michael Bloomberg, he went to Hopkins too. He was, obviously an effective leader from a young age. He had a finance career, but then he also had an idea to build something, and he did it. And what he has built has been an engine for an entire segment of the economy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty remarkable. And to then step away and get into politics and to be thinking about, Bloomberg Philanthropies, aside from being a great donor to Johns Hopkins, is almost like a government institution. They pick major initiatives and invest heavily in those initiatives. And I think the fact that he's been able to balance big business and build something so successful, and then at the same time invest so strategically and aggressively for the betterment of humanity with a clear eye toward the data. I love that he's accomplished both, and that he did it. He's done it in every sector, right? He's done it in the for-profit, government, and nonprofit. And I just think that's a really incredible journey, and it's very inspiring.
That's a great model. Just a little interaction I've had with him. I once had a tragic circumstance where a former congregant of mine, unfortunately, he passed away. He was missing. He went out onto the ocean one day and he was missing. And he actually was an employee of Michael Bloomberg, pretty high up in this company. And Michael lent his helicopter, plane, whatever, to help them, multiple days of searching. So by all accounts, he's also a mensch. So
that's amazing. I mean, that's it, right? That's doing the right thing, because you can.
Exactly. Okay, cool. I have so many questions, to be the truth is, I don't want to overdo it. So let's talk a little bit about your current job, your current focus, your current startup, your company.
Sure.
I'd love to hear about NBA All-Star Weekend. I'm a big sports fan. How did you kind of get involved in this space? Like, what, again, with the whole backdrop that you've provided, kind of like why was this the next thing, that you're doing? And let's hear a little bit about it.
Sure. So, brief history. After Think Impact, while I was at Think Impact, I wanted to scale our impact through technology. We had I'll call it like a social learning model where people would collaborate to create things. So I ended up developing a mobile first platform for experiential learning. And that was called Unleash. And I spun it out to be a separate company. And we ended up serving a lot in the international education space, and we've served over 150,000 students in that space on that platform. And now that platform has gone on to provide not just a core educational tool, but we do a lot of software development services for different educational or consumer products use cases. So we build apps now because we want to help others impact the world. And turns out that other people have great ideas too, and we would love to support them. So I did that, and now Unleash provides this software development service, which has been really cool. We've gotten to work on some really great technology to impact people's lives. We're working on a literacy product right now. And
it's a great name, Unleash. Like a great name. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and the EE is experiential education. So UNEESH, but it was always unleash your potential.
Right.
That was the concept. So we did that. And then I stepped aside. I'm still a partner at that company, but I stepped aside to build a charter school network in West Africa. Did that for a couple of years. And I was actually in the UK raising funds for that charter school network. I went to Wales that morning, raised $1 million for the school network. Came back from that meeting on the train, went and met Sarah Cass, who would become my co-founder, but we had been connecting intermittently online and through a network that was created thanks to Reality Global from the Schusterman Foundation. So I'd gone to Israel and I got connected with Sarah through some networking event online. And we ended up meeting in London on February 14th, 2018. And she pretty much sat me down and we had talked a little bit, and she had a sense of who I was and what I was interested in, and vice versa. But she said, we've got this problem in society. We're more interconnected digitally than ever before, but disconnected locally. Mm-hmm. And we need to use technology to bring people together. And I don't know how. That's basically what she said. And she said, I have ideas, but I need to turn those ideas into something. And she and I started riffing, and we spent 6 hours talking about different ways to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. She looked at me and she said, you're going to start this company with me. And I thought that was crazy because I was pretty tied up with a couple other commitments. And then in July of 2018, she came out to LA and we incorporated Fabric. So we ended up launching Fabric on this kind of basic idea that we're more interconnected digitally, but disconnected locally than ever before. And we wanted to use technology to bring people together. So we had different ideas. Our first idea was like a cryptocurrency for social capital, that there'd be a mutually earning algorithm for people who connected in real life, really trying to get people to hang out or do things for each other. We ended up not doing that, but there were some elements that were interesting. There's, you know, the game mechanics that are interesting. There's the use of technology and a mobile phone. And we ended up building, our first product was a public messaging app in augmented reality. So it was the ability to share a thought as a thought bubble overhead based on your location. And others could look up through their phone and see the thoughts of those nearby and tap to start a conversation.
Really? Wow.
So it was an app that would allow people to kind of look around and, from my point of view, connect with others and create new opportunities for themselves.
Now, what's Fabric? Is Fabric of Society? What's the name? What's the name?
Yeah, the social fabric.
Oh, that's what it is.
Preparing the social fabric.
Got it. Okay.
And so that's how we got started. We launched that app at the very end of February 2020. So COVID hit and we could not go to market with the app. It became dangerous to use the app in a sense,
right?
Because people meeting in real life was so risky.
Right.
So we ended up pivoting at first to providing the underlying technology to other startups. And then we were looking for the right market to bring this technology to. And we interviewed a whole range of different markets and ended up talking to sports, and sports just got it. They immediately said, you know, this is this technology could be really powerful for our fans. And so we started looking at how this technology could apply to that scenario. What's so cool about it is sports is really the number one industry that brings people together. You've got 150 million Americans going to a professional sports game every year, right, and growing. And so if we could leverage that platform to bring people together, to create connection, it would be remarkable. So that's how we got into sports. We have since we have a working relationship with the NBA, NHL, MLS, and MLB. We've been part of, the NBA All-Star Game and NBA Draft and Summer League and Con and in-season tournament.
Are you a big sports fan yourself, or not necessarily?
Yeah, no, I grew up a Broncos fan. Really going to games with my dad as a kid, and love sports. And I have a very, very athletic son who, I have two kids, one of whom absolutely loves anything with a ball. And so I coach and I spend a lot of time in sports, and always had, but never professionally. So now I'm in the sports world and it's been a lot of fun.
Wow. Okay. So NFL was one of them? You said NFL?
No, not the NFL.
NFL. But is there a reason why?
The NFL is not known for paying for things because they don't have to. So I don't know, maybe strike that. But the real reason is we ended up getting a relationship with the NBA. We talked to the team that would try new tech out, and they got really excited about it. And it's flowed from there. We got the same for MLB and getting approved for the MLB ballpark app, or NHL or MLS. We've just been talking to the folks who want to try this new technology and have invested in that. It's we have talked to the NFL and it's all been positive. Actually, we've had great conversations with the NFL. We just haven't pushed it because it is a different beast.
Got it. Fascinating. So give me a little feel, so what exactly practically? I go to a Brooklyn Nets game, I go to a New York Knicks game.
Sure.
How do I interact with your
business? So the way the technology works is we allow teams or leagues to publish digital content, interactive digital content in mixed reality, okay, based on time and location. So you could create like a 3D animated experience that has a mystery result or a surprise outcome that's gamified to earn points or prizes or to connect you to a specific experience. So what that looks like in practice is either you go through the league or team app and you open a camera view on your phone and it's inside of the app or in a browser. You're looking through your camera view and you're seeing digital content dropped around you, literally around, hovering around you, that you can interact with. So it might be a scratch, or it might be a drop, it might be a video you can watch. And for participation, you can earn points and rewards. And so what we can do is nudge behavior to get people to engage with content in specific locations, specific times. And that becomes almost the one-stop shop for, every activation you see on the video board can be centralized, that you can just come back to the experience and you can participate. You can vote for the song, you can do the trivia, all of which can be done in this mixed reality environment. And what's very cool about it is we've also created now a new digital medium specifically for live events. So that means the teams and leagues can now generate digital revenue, because instead of just displaying opportunities on a video board, now we've created an interactive experience where action can be taken, data can be collected, purchases can be made, and so on. So we've created a medium that we think will add a new revenue stream to live experiences all over the world.
And just and like the arrangement is like you take a piece of the action of what the team sells, or it's more like they just pay you a fee and whatever they may. Or
so it's a couple pieces. Primarily where it's a subscription for the platform, and then it's a pay as you go model. So if it's succeeding, we get paid more. If it's not, if they're not doing a lot, then we don't get paid as much. So it's sort of a pay as you go. The more fans do, the more benefit they're getting, the more we make, right? As part of it. Right now, we don't do a lot of rev share deals because they're complicated and they're very vendor specific.
Got it.
And it's easier to facilitate the transaction. But we're very interested in all of the above, and what we're really looking to do is just increase fan participation in a measurable way and help create that deep, loyal, interpersonal connection for fans with the team, with each other, that they then keep coming back and enjoy.
Fascinating. Okay, very cool. I'm going to pivot a little bit to October 7th, that date and time, if I may. Very sadly, all the listeners of this podcast know that there was a very, very, terrible, painful attack on the Jewish people in Israel, and we're still very much engaged and intertwined in the conflict because of that. I'd love for you to speak a little bit. You mentioned earlier about visiting Israel. I'd love to hear a little bit about your connection to Israel, the time you've spent there, and kind of some of your thoughts, if you would share. In the time that the very complex time that we're living in right now, both here in the States and as well as abroad.
Yeah. Well, first, just shock still, I think. Still processing, still trying to understand what this all means, and trying to view it not through a lens of victimhood. As it's easy to kind of go there and feel like Jews are the most hated people on earth, and it's hard. But on the other side,
how do you not feel that?
it's very hard not to feel that. And actually, it's been talking to my Israeli colleagues, and I do have a very deep connection to Israel. I've been there more times than I can remember. I have family that lives there. I have my co-founder is in Jerusalem. Tamir on my team is in Jerusalem. Our venture fund that led our seed round is based in Israel.
Who is that?
Aaron Zucker from Sapir VP Venture Partners.
Mm-hmm.
So the connection to the state of Israel is strong, and my interest. We have many investors there. My interest is in seeing a very vibrant and thriving Israel. And I do think, going back to your original question about abroad versus at home, for me, there's a really important thread in that, which is at home means also the Jewish people, American Jewish life, Israel. So that as I've grown older, and I did intern at APAC when I was in college, I was always connected to the issue. But as I've grown older, I've taken a deeper interest in the role of in what I can do for the Jewish people. So October 7th, I had studied international affairs, and I wasn't surprised. I don't think I don't think anybody felt like Gaza was turning into Singapore, right? This was a hotbed for hatred, and they had a mission to the destruction of
Well,
Israel.
apparently, the government of Israel was surprised. I'm saying
The
that.
government of Israel was no, the government of Israel made choices to to delay action on a problem for political gain. I mean, it's unambiguous actually,
Mhm.
and that's politics in its worst. That's a shame. But what I reflect on there is basically the reaction was inward first. You know, how do we protect our own? How do we live in a world that has such incredible animosity towards the Jewish people, and that Israel must do whatever it needs to do to protect itself? That was sort of thing one. When you see this play out now, 5 months later, almost, I guess, yeah. As we see this play out, it occurs to me that what we're really dealing with is a very, very multidimensional international relations paradigm. This is not a straight problem. And we have to we can't look inward. That's not Jewish. We have to engage the world. We can't hide. It's not appropriate for us to crawl into a hole. We obviously need to protect ourselves, but I think the multidimensionality of today's geopolitical system is so much more complex than even was being written about before. Like, we still see the world through a bipolar narrative, a Cold War narrative. There's Russia, and now China, and then the United States and Europe, and that is not accurate. There are pieces of that remain, but we can't discount everything as a proxy. You can't just say Iran is just a proxy for the Eastern Bloc. It's not. It's got its own agenda, and India has its own agenda, and Israel has its own agenda, and America has its own agenda, and we have to be much more eyes wide open about that.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. What you just said. I don't know.
And I'm not in government, and I'm not studying relations every day, but from where I sit, we've oversimplified the problem.
Mm-hmm. Can I push you a drop more to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be like, we can't think about Israel. Of course, Israel doesn't just have a right to exist; it exists, and it has an obligation to defend itself. But we can't see the world as pro-Israel or anti-Israel, because if we do that, everybody's our enemy, unless for a moment they're not. What we need to do is recognize that it's one actor in a very complicated system, and that everybody has a different incentive. You look at the way Saudi Arabia or the UAE has operated, it's dramatically different from other neighbors in the region, because they all have their own incentive, and they're not all looking for Putin's protection or China's protection. They're looking for their own self-interest. And I think probably the biggest takeaway is, as a dreamer, as a person who has invested a lot of time and energy in social impact, we have an instinct to trust and to see the good in others first. And I don't want to lose that, but I think there's a really important piece of, sort of the reality check that, we're part of a system, and that system has a lot of self-interested operators. And they define their interests differently than we do. And so Israel can't just, I react, even now after October 7th, I react to, and I was there for a minute, but I react today to seeing everybody as either pro or anti, because I think most of them just don't care. I think they just want what they want, and they're going to get it however they're going to get it. And I think that's probably a better way to think through this moment.
That's interesting. Okay, fair. I want to shift our conversation for a moment to philanthropy. And I
Sure.
was going to ask you earlier, you committed to give 10,000 to raise $10,000 when you were, back in the day, when you were much younger. Curious how you kind of how you ended up doing that. But the bigger question is really a question of how do you see philanthropy? How do you access it? And nobody has unlimited resources, unlimited time. Kind of how do you think about it in your own sphere of influence?
Well, I actually so we I think about philanthropy. I probably lead with an honest assessment of what impact dollars have versus time, and outsiders versus insiders. I really don't think you can throw money at a problem. That you can put money towards solving a problem.
Hmm.
I'm I've seen a lot of money go to waste, and I've also seen a lot of good projects that have been starved for capital. And so you really have to think through, from the perspective of the beneficiary, what works, what makes sense, and what actually is sustainable. So for me, philanthropy is as much about, you know, creating, kind of teaching, not even teaching a man to fish, but sort of creating the skills and context for, you know, Lador Vador, for things to be passed on so that there's opportunity for everyone downstream. I'm involved with Johns Hopkins. I'm on a board. Am a little bit philanthropic there, and to my temple. And I think I give a ton of time. I don't really count it, is the truth. I'm not a big, I'm, not a quid pro quo guy. So it's not like, look, I gave an hour to the local soccer league. Now I must get this back. To me, it's part of being in a community. Philanthropy should be really, and it could be the global community, it could be the local community, it could be your neighborhood. I think philanthropy should be less about um, measuring what you're contributing. It should not be about measuring what you're contributing. I don't think that's right. I think philanthropy should be about doing what your instinct tells you needs to be done for a better environment, a better society. And I find, I do want to raise my hand here. I'm on some nonprofit boards, and sometimes, and when I talk to the executive directors of these boards, when I've been one, because I've run two nonprofits also, um, the effort to get a grant from a foundation or from an ultra high net worth individual as a process is really, really flawed. It's unacceptable. The stringing along, these are people who need money to pay their bills. They're afraid to ask, and then they do, and then they get strung along. The way philanthropy is being conducted is actually pretty gross in a lot of cases. And I think philanthropists need to take a hard look at how they're treating the people asking for money, because yes, there's the power dynamic. At the end, money talks. But what I think is alarming is, if somebody's raising money from me, a clear answer early is much better than a string along in hopes and dreams, because it's just not right to do to these organizations. And they become discouraged on their mission, which is usually the real work. So, from my perspective, philanthropy actually as a term, while it has all the good intentions, it's almost become this gold-plated concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to philanthropic events where it is very gold-plated. And I don't think any of the philanthropists in the room realize how skewed those power dynamics are. And I think it's really counterproductive for their mission as a philanthropist. So I think philanthropy could do a lot better job in how they work with the people who are asking for funds. And I think that's a bar raiser that needs to happen.
Fascinating. I'm going to end with this question. Okay. I like to ask my guests different, just out of the box questions. I'm just going to ask you, to share maybe the best advice you ever have received in your life, and maybe some poor advice that maybe you received.
Oh my God. How much time do we have?
Not
Uh, you know,
enough.
it's interesting. I think,
You can pick one or the other. You don't have to do both if you don't want.
no, I'll start with the worst advice I've heard. Okay. I was once listening to a podcast and the former CEO of Peloton was on, and he was giving advice about to a founder, I think out of India, who was asking what they could do to get their business really going. And the advice was make sure you have a nice office that people come to work excited to work, and invest in the office so that you create an environment for people to be energized and excited.
Not relevant today. Yeah. Okay.
Not not relevant at all, and B, hands down the worst entrepreneurial advice I've ever heard, because the idea of investing aggressively in things that are non-performing for the business,
Right. Externalities. Right.
Yeah, it was the idea of having an office for people to come together is a great one. The idea of taking very hard-earned dollars, and this woman was clearly working hard to just get by, taking very hard-earned money and putting it into stuff, into material things, just felt like the anti-Bezos answer, right? Who worked off of his, famously worked off of a desk, off of a door that was made into a desk, and drove a Jetta while he was a billionaire. So there was like that. That's the worst advice I think I've ever come across. The best advice, the best advice is to trust your gut. So one of the things, so I'll put it this way. I once read that you need to trust your gut where you have expertise and not trust your gut where you don't have expertise.
Well, that's good.
And I think that's really interesting advice. And we find in human interaction, we have expertise. Our brain is wired from birth that we're taking in inputs. When we're not active, we're consuming inputs all the time, and it's wiring our brain to recognize things. That's how we get socialized into who we are. That's why Jews feel Jewish when you meet them later in life. It's because the default network, the neural networks, are automatically kind of consuming our environment, and we grow up in a Jewish environment. True for every culture, every society. Because we're taking all this input, we're building expertise on what feels right, what resonates with us. We know what's good for us, especially on the interpersonal side. And trusting your gut has always served me right. And not trusting my gut when you think you're leaving something on the table has always backfired, and it always comes back. So you got to go with your gut instinct on these things, which is why, going back to my previous point, why philanthropy, if they believe in a concept, trust your gut, go with it. If you don't. Investors do that every day. I think you got to trust your gut when it comes to things you have expertise in.
Excellent. Saul, thank you so much for making the time. I appreciate having you on the podcast. I want to wish you great success, continued success in all your endeavors.